Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has inserted herself into the news cycle.
She got into a back and forth with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
It all started when Duffy tweeted, "Big news, talk to the Doge team. They're going to plug in to help our aviation system."
Clinton then responded, "They have no relevant experience. Most of them aren't old enough to rent a car. And you're going to let them mess with airline safety that's already deteriorated on your watch?"
Duffy then hit back, writing on X, "Madam Secretary, with all due respect, experienced Washington bureaucrats are the reason our nation's infrastructure is crumbling. You need to sit this one out."
And Clinton took it a step further, writing, "US airlines had gone 16 years without fatal crashes. Then MAGA fired the FAA chief, gutted the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, and threatened air traffic controllers with layoffs. Now there have been 2 fatal crashes. Hope your unvetted 22-year-olds fix things fast."
Well, look, I don't think it is fair to jump in there and attribute to these crashes and say that's the result of FAA changes being made, just as you, Niall, objected to saying immediately, well, it's DEI or it's because they changed the testing procedures 10 years ago. We don't know yet what was the cause of these crashes. I have paid less attention to the one in Philadelphia. The one here in D.C., from the information we have gathered so far, sounds like there were a lot of concerns about this air traffic corridor being very, very crowded. People who fly helicopters have been warning that this is so dangerous to have the number of planes you have landing and taking off at Reagan while having a lane, an airspace lane for helicopters as well. At night with all the lights that are on the sides of the river, it's just very dangerous. It sounds like that might have been some negligence there to not consider that, but whether that specifically has to, that's been a long-running problem and has to do with changes that got implemented by Trump in the couple weeks he's had some power over governance. That doesn't seem fair to me.
No, I think that is correct. I think that this is part of a broad pattern that sadly we see so many times when there's a dramatic or tragic event, which is that people rush in and say, aha, see, this proves that my pre-existing belief was correct, or my pre-existing belief explains why this thing has happened. I have seen zero compelling evidence that DEI had anything to do with the crash in Washington. Like you, just by virtue of geographic location, I have been watching that story more closely than the tragic events in Philadelphia. But anyway, the point is I've seen no evidence that DEI was responsible. I've seen no evidence that firing the FAA chief or winding down this advisory safety board was responsible. So in that sense, I don't think it's terribly helpful to try to sort of squeeze really awful, sad events into a pre-existing ideological frame. On a practical, non-ideological sense, there is a persistent question about air traffic control staffing levels. Whether that affected either of these 2 instances, I don't think we can say definitively. I do think that just on a basic practical level, we have to be concerned about the fact that those shortages have existed for so long. The union that represents air traffic controllers talking about the fact that about 4 in 10 of their members are working 60-hour weeks to try to keep pace with demand. I don't think anybody sensible thinks it's a great idea for air traffic controllers to be working 60-hour weeks.
Yeah, and we want the right amount of safety oversight. This board that got nuked, a component of it is TSA type stuff.
Right, security.
Which I have, complained about for a long time. I find TSA security to be very, very heavy-handed and expensive and creates a lot of inefficiencies in the airport, in my view, and the views of actually a lot of experts who've looked at the situation, without actually adding much to safety.
This is the security theater.
The
argument,
security
right?
theater, the failure to properly, there's exhaustive screening being done for, hairspray bottles and tweezers and things like that, they miss it. Whenever they get tested, somebody tries to actually smuggle something through dangerous, they miss it. That's one. 2, there are serious questions about whether you even had these things. You could actually construct a device to take over a plane. We have to remember hijackings occurred. 9/11 occurred at a time where the default, when the operating procedure for a plane being hijacked was to let the hijacking happen, because no one had ever thought to fly a plane into a building before. The cockpit doors, you could actually take over the cockpit. Now the cockpit door is locked. That one innovation does a tremendous amount of good in terms of making it impossible to actually take over the plane. So I have serious questions about whether people could, and the things like, you remember the guy with the, what was it, his underpants or his shoe or
the
something?
underwear bomber.
Like that was not going to do anything to damage the plane. So anyway, I think it is a lot of expensive theater that does not enhance safety. There's even arguments it undermines safety because a certain number of people every year choose to drive a long distance rather than fly because it's become so onerous, and more people die in car crashes, vastly more, infinitely more in car crashes than plane crashes. So not everything being done in the name of safety is always worthwhile and necessary. That's my one caution. Now, of course, we need to have air traffic controllers who are getting enough sleep and are well compensated and are able to do the job, and we should investigate whether that had something to do with what's going on here. Right. But you could always add more layers of nominal safety at great cost without necessarily getting anything beneficial out of it.
Well, sure, absolutely. But I think the TSA argument and the air traffic controller argument are two separate things. I know, and anyone who flies with any frequency knows, even in terms of the airport security, there's often a lot of inconsistency between different airports. Oh, I have to take this out of my bag now. I was able to take it through at the airport that I departed from.
That's what I love when you asked, is this one of the times where I got to take my laptop out? Right. And then they bark at you like you're insane for asking that question. But it's different from line to line. Right,
exactly. So all of that stuff, I think, undercuts confidence in that system. That, though, is different from air traffic controllers. And I noticed that in this current federal buyout, the deadline for which occurs later today, there seems to be some confusion. Sean Duffy, who is featuring in these tweets, has said that people who are involved in, I believe his phrase is critical safety, at the among airport and transportation authorities will not be offered that. But the union that represents most air traffic controllers say they have not been told that the offer has been rescinded to their members. So there is some confusion about whether people could take buyouts even when we have the shortage that I mentioned earlier on. I think that's an absolutely valid topic to debate and valid topic to critique, even though I would be wary of drawing a direct line of causation to Washington and Philadelphia.
Stay tuned, more Rising right after this.